Chapter 1. Tyberos the Red Wake revealed. He is a shadow that drifts through the silence between stars, a wraith not bound by time, nor tied to lineage. Tyberos the Red Wake, a name whispered like a curse, spoken not in reverence but in resignation. For when his name reaches a world, it is already too late. He does not arrive like a storm. You see, storms can be predicted. He descends like the weight of judgment, ancient and indifferent. No clarion call, no blaring war horns, only silence and then ruin. There are no parades of the space sharks, no banners waving the void to herald their presence. They emerge from darkness, born of it, returning to it when their work is done. And Tyberos, clad in obsidian ceramite streaked with the blood of those long forgotten, stands at the apex of this philosophy. His armor bears the deep scars of forgotten wars, not the polished pride of honor, but the grim reality of survival. Each gash, each scorch mark, is a memory he does not speak of. They are not trophies. They are warnings. The Carcharodons do not speak of history. They do not need to. Their legacy is carved into the bones of dead moons and lost hives. But if they are a myth made real, then Tyberos is their embodiment, myth-beast executioner. The title he wears, Red Wake, is no poetic embellishment. It is literal. It is earned. Planets have bled in his passing. Oceans turn crimson, the ground itself soaked and unrecognizable beneath the deluge of fallen foes. He does not command in the traditional sense. He imposes. His presence alone drives warriors into formation, not through discipline, but through fear. There is no artist warfare, no flourish or pageantry, just the cold efficiency of extinction. He leads not for glory but for finality. Where others speak of campaigns and victories, Tyberos delivers silence. A silence so deep it hums in the bones of survivors. If there are any, he does not inspire the loyalty of song or verse. His is the loyalty of instinct. The kind beasts offer their apex predator. Those beneath him obey, not because of respect, but because disobedience feels like suicide. Even his brothers within the Carcharodons do not pretend to understand him. They follow him because something deeper compels them to a shared violence, a wordless creed. In truth, there is something beyond human in him. His gaze does not reflect empathy, nor even cruelty. It is emptier than that. His purpose feels older than the Imperium itself, as if he were dredged from the sea of time before reason had fully formed. A revenant, guided by something more ancient than duty. He is not a tactician. He is inevitability. And what of those who have seen him and lived? Their accounts are few and always conflicting. Some say his armor glows faintly red in darkness, like the coals of an ancient pyre. Others claim he moves too fast to see, that his strikes come like thoughts, instantaneous, unannounced. Still others say nothing at all, broken by the memory. But all agree on one thing. There is no bargaining with the Red Wake, no negotiation, no delay. Once marked by his gaze, a fate is sealed. He does not revel in this role. That would imply joy. No, his nature is closer to function. He is not cruel. Cruelty suggests emotion. He is a blade, sharpened beyond reason, wielded by an unseen hand. And when he moves, entire systems change course. Not by politics, not by diplomacy, but through erasure. Tyberos does not merely end lives. He ends legacies. Chapter 2. The Abyss Hungers. The void, eternal and unfeeling, does not whisper. It devours. And from its cold womb came Tyberos, who did not flinch in the face of annihilation. He did not merely endure the abyss. He answered it. He returned its silence with screams, its hunger with his own. While other Astartes were carved in the image of nobility or vengeance, Tyberos was born of something more ancient, something more raw. He was a shadow that crawled beneath the Imperium's doctrine, a monster cloaked in the armor of a son of humanity. In the deep chambers of the Carchardon's ancient fleets, where blood runs black and traditions are passed not by word, but by ritual violence, Tyberos rose. They do not speak of his origins, because origin does not matter to predators, only to kill, and Tyberos was born to kill. He was baptized not in oaths, but in entrails, in the desolate gulfs of the Maelstrom Zone, where mutant empires slither and Xeno's corruption festers like infected wounds. Tyberos cut his name into history with chainblade and claw. No banners, no glory, just corpses and silence. The Red Tide was his calling, a brutal purge masquerading as order, carried out with cold efficiency. Worlds once teeming with defiance found only silence after his coming. Silence and the smell of iron and ash. He did not speak to them. He did not preach. He only descended, and from that descent came death. Swift, absolute, ritualistic, but it was more than warfare. It was doctrine. The Red Tide was not just extermination. It was communion, a dark mass in the name of survival. The Carchardons do not recruit, they reap. They descend upon imperial worlds not for honor, but for flesh, for gene seed, for bodies, for new beasts to shape. And Tyberos, at the center of this doctrine, led them with the reverence of a prophet and the savagery of a butcher. Where others saw his acts as barbarism, he saw them as clarity. Where others debated the morality of the tithe, Tyberos silenced them with results. The Maelstrom Zone, once a boiling pit of rebellion and heresy, grew still under his watch, not through governance, not through diplomacy, but through fear. For to see the black of space torn open by the arrival of the Carchardons was to know one thing: you are prey. And Tyberos, the Black Reaver, was coming. His name became a hush in the halls of traitor warbands. A grim omen whispered in fevered breaths across the hive levels of rebellious planets. They said he was no longer a man, no longer even a transhuman relic of the Emperor's gene labs. He was a shadow shaped into a weapon, a void-touched revenant, a living echo of old night's cruelty made flesh. No pick feed survived his campaigns. No Vox transmission remained uncorrupted. He left no trace of himself, only ruins, wreckage, and myths. Myths that burned hotter than plasma. Stories that painted him as a being who walked through bolter fire, unflinching, whose claws tore through dreadnoughts, whose silence broke minds. And if a world was lucky, they would not see him at all. They would see only the aftermath, a purge so efficient, so surgical, that even the administratum could not decipher how it was done. Entire PDF regiments gone, civilian populations erased, buildings standing but empty, too empty, as though the world itself had exhaled and died. This was not conquest, this was ritual. Tyberos was not merely leading a chapter. He was shaping a legacy, one written in the blood of forgotten planets, one whispered in terror across the void, one that did not need monuments or declarations. It needed only acts, and in the grim dark of the 41st millennium, acts speak louder than history. He wore no honor markings, carried no relics of terror. His armor was not gilded, but scarred, marked with trophies, bones of the hunted, skulls of the damned, each one a scripture, a declaration of purpose. He was not here to save humanity. He was here to correct it. And so, when the Red Tide was invoked again and again, Tyberos did not hesitate. He did not question the morality. He executed. He cleansed. And in his wake, he left silence, a silence so deep it threatened to swallow entire systems. But beneath it all, something darker stirred. Not in the warp, not in the gods, in him. Something that made even the other Carchardons glance away when he passed. something that pulsed behind the eyes of his monstrous helm, a hunger, not for power, not for glory, but for endings. And so he waits at the edge of the galaxy, where light dies and monsters rule, sharpening his blades, not for victory, but for the next name on the list. Chapter 3, Echoes of the Abyss. As the Red Wake surged forward in the endless void, Tyberos did not merely lead his warriors. He unleashed them. Their presence was not one of bolt or fire alone, but of psychological devastation. They were a myth made manifest, a black tide whispered in the darkness between hive levels and void decks. Tyberos at the helm was more than a captain. He was a force of nature, clad in the Terminator armor of midnight steel. His silhouette became the omen of doom. Where others relied on stratagems or honor, he relied on inevitability. When the Red Wake arrived, survival was not in question, only the method of your demise. He wielded hunger and slake not as weapons, but as extensions of his wrath. One claw tore through ceramite and flesh with relentless fury. The other, elegantly curved and cruel, was surgical in its execution. He moved like a beast unshackled. Every motion a ballet of brutality, an ancient rhythm sung in blood and silence. And yet, there was an eerie grace to the violence, a silence before the strike, a hesitation before the scream. Tyberos didn't roar his defiance. He watched, listened, learned. His tactical brilliance and behind the beast, buried beneath layers of aggression. But it was there, cold, calculated, clinical. He studied enemy formations as a predator studies the heartbeat of its prey. Every engagement was ritual, every kill intentioned. There was no waste, no excess, only purpose. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of Tyberos was not his ferocity. It was the unity he forged in chaos. The Carcradons were once scattered, phantoms of an ancient era, unmoored in time. It was Tyberos who gave them focus, a mission, a name to strike fear. He rekindled old doctrines, buried deep in forbidden code, tactics thought extinct, philosophies no longer sanctioned. He revived them in blood. What he offered his brothers was not comfort or glory. It was meaning, the kind found in the marrow of bones and the silence between heartbeats. Under his command, they became shadows given form, enforcers of an ancient whose origin was unknown, perhaps even to them. It is said that during the purge of the Outer Reach, Tyberos moved ahead of his forces, alone, infiltrating a renegade citadel without a word spoken. He emerged hours later, armor soaked, not a single bolt expended, his claws still steaming. None dared ask what had transpired inside. The message was clear. He was not merely a weapon. He was a myth in motion, a silence, a hunger, a red wake. And to follow him was to walk willingly into oblivion and never question why. Chapter 4, The Trial of Shadows. Among the void-faring corridors of the Red Wake, loyalty was not earned, it was tested. Tyberos ruled not with laurels or legacy, but through the ritual of proving. Every warrior under his command had been forged in trial, tempered by rites as ancient as the gene seed that fueled their hearts. The Carcradons were not recruited. They were taken, plucked from the outer edges of imperial records, from death worlds forgotten by the administratum and warp-ravaged colonies teetering on extinction. To be chosen by the Red Wake was to be condemned or liberated. The line between the two was ever thin. Tyberos' trials were not ceremonial. They were brutal, unrelenting, often fatal. No oaths were spoken. No rites of passage celebrated. Only survival. There are whispered tales of the trial of the bleeding stars, an ordeal in which aspirants were dropped onto the airless husk of a dead moon, stalked by cybernetic predators once used for Adeptus Mechanicus weapon tests. No beacon, no aid, only darkness and the constant hum of machine growls in the black. Those who emerged days later, scarred and silent, were not congratulated. They were handed a blade and told to earn the rest. This was Tyberos' creed. Pain is proof, and it was not limited to neophytes. Even seasoned veterans were not exempt. Discipline aboard the Red Wake was kept through trial and dominance, not bureaucracy. Fail in execution, and you bled for it, not always metaphorically. But this harsh system birthed something far more dangerous than obedience. It created believers. Each Carcharodon under Tyberos did not simply follow, they adhered to something more primal than orders, something older, a shared language of silence, suffering, and swift violence, a doctrine etched into their very bones. Among their ranks, Tyberos was more than a commander. He was totem and tribunal, the judgment of the gene ancestor, a walking reckoning that held the line between purpose and perdition. And in this structure of brutality, there was an eerie harmony. While the chapters of Ultramar relied on Codex and Council, and the Wolves on Saga and Pact Bond, the Carcharodons held to silence and consequence. Orders were not barked. They were given in gestures, in ancient battle sign, in shifts of stance and posture. A twitch of Tyberos' gauntlet could send an entire squad into action. A tilt of his helm could mean execution without hesitation. This was how he ruled, not through noise but through weight, the weight of presence, of reputation, of the unspoken dread that if he faltered, Tyberos would not yell nor scold. He would simply watch. And in that gaze, warriors saw every trial they had endured, every claw mark, every brother who hadn't returned. It was not fear he bred, but a visceral clarity, a code understood only by those who walked the edge of extinction with him, a code older than doctrine, more binding than any vow, a code carved in the dark and spoken in blood. Chapter 4, The Trial of Shadows. Among the void-faring corridors of the Red Wake, loyalty was not earned, it was tested. Tyberos ruled not with laurels or legacy, but through the ritual of proving. Every warrior under his command had been forged in trial, tempered by rites as ancient as the gene seed that fueled their hearts. The Carcharodons were not recruited. They were taken, plucked from the outer edges of imperial records, from deaf worlds forgotten by the administratum and warp-ravaged colonies teetering on extinction. To be chosen by the Red Wake was to be condemned or liberated. The line between the two was ever thin. Tyberos' trials were not ceremonial. They were brutal, unrelenting, often fatal. No oaths were spoken, no rites of passage celebrated, only survival. There are whispered tales of the trial of the bleeding stars, an ordeal in which aspirants were dropped onto the airless husk of a dead moon, stalked by cybernetic predators once used for Adeptus Mechanicus weapon tests. No beacon, no aid, only darkness and the constant hum of machine growls in the black. Those who emerged days later, scarred and silent, were not congratulated. They were handed a blade and told to earn the rest. This was Tyberos' creed. Pain is proof, and it was not limited to neophytes. Even seasoned veterans were not exempt. Discipline aboard the Red Wake was kept through trial and dominance, not bureaucracy. Fail in execution, and you bled for it, not always metaphorically. But this harsh system birthed something far more dangerous than obedience. It created believers. Each Carcharodon under Tyberos did not simply follow. They adhered to something more primal than orders, something older, a shared language of silence, suffering, and swift violence, a doctrine etched into their very bones. Among their ranks, Tyberos was more than a commander. He was totem and tribunal, the judgment of the gene ancestor, a walking reckoning that held the line between purpose and perdition. And in this structure of brutality, there was an eerie harmony. While the chapters of Ultramar relied on Codex and Council, and the Wolves on Saga and Pact Bond, The Carcharodons held to silence and consequence. Orders were not barked. They were given in gestures, in ancient battle sign, in shifts of stance and posture. A twitch of Tyberos' gauntlet could send an entire squad into action. A tilt of his helm could mean execution without hesitation. This was how he ruled, not through noise but through weight, the weight of presence, of reputation, of the unspoken dread that if you faltered, Tyberos would not yell nor scold. He would simply watch, and in that gaze, warriors saw every trial they had endured, every claw mark, every brother who hadn't returned. It was not fear he bred, but a visceral clarity, a code understood only by those who walked the edge of extinction with him, a code older than doctrine, more binding than any vow, a code carved in the dark and spoken in blood. Chapter 5, Instruments of Terror. Tyberos the Redwake was not merely a warrior. He was the embodiment of death itself. His weapons were not tools forged to celebrate victory. They were instruments sculpted in the darkest depths of the Imperium's twisted history. They were not fashioned to bring glory to the Emperor, but to bring annihilation to any who dared challenge the Carcharodons' brutal doctrine. His war gear was his identity. His strikes were not acts of combat, but executions of a predestined fate. The claws, hunger, and slake were not mere weapons of war. No, they were as much a part of Tyberos as the blood that flowed through his veins, as integral to his being as his very bones. They were an extension of his will, sharpened by countless wars, each battle, each slaughter, grinding them down into perfect tools of annihilation. These weapons did not simply strike. They tore, they devoured, they consumed. Their names were fitting for what they represented. Hunger was the relentless craving for destruction that never subsided. It hungered for more than blood. It sought the complete destruction of anything it touched, erasing it from existence. Slake, on the other hand, was the act of satisfying that hunger, but only momentarily. It was a release that came after the chaos, the satiation of a thirst that was always fleeting, always demanding more. Together, they were the instruments of an endless cycle, where nothing could ever truly be destroyed without being reborn in the wake of even greater violence. When Tyberos wielded them, it was not with the calculated grace of a veteran tactician. It was with the fury of a beast long unleashed from the confines of its cage, a predator set loose upon the helpless. Each swing of his claws sent shockwaves to the battlefield, carving through armor and flesh with brutal efficiency. There was no room for mercy, no space for hesitation. His strikes were not just blows. They were odes of annihilation, marking the end of everything they touched. But these claws were not forged in Mechanicum's forges, where the finest minds of the Imperium worked tirelessly to craft the perfect weapon. No, they were shaped in the darkness of a much older forge, one that resided in the heart of the Carcharodons themselves. These weapons were made for a singular purpose: to serve the Redwake, to fulfill Tyberos' unyielding drive to erase all in his path. They were an echo of something far more primal, something older than the Emperor's shining ideals of humanity's greatness. The hunger and slake were not mere weapons to Tyberos. They were symbols. They were reminders of the price that would be paid by those who dared stand against him. Each swing of his claws was an act of fate, a declaration that once his enemies fell under the shadow of the Redwake, they would cease to exist, not just in body, but in memory. They would be erased from history itself, forgotten as if they had never been. In their place, only silence remained, a silence that spoke of the predator who had hunted them to the very edges of the galaxy and beyond. Chapter 6, The Unyielding Hunt. The hunt was never a singular event for Tyberos. It was a way of life. To him, the galaxy was not a place of stasis. It was a vast, ever-shifting hunting ground. He did not merely fight wars. He stalked them. The Carcharodons were no ordinary Space Marine chapter. They were more than soldiers. They were predators. and their war was a hunt itself. For Tyberos, each battle was but a momentary flicker, a heartbeat in the grand scheme of his existence. Yet, within that fleeting moment, he and his brothers could carve a path of terror that would resonate for centuries. The Carcharodon's doctrine of aggression was built upon the idea that true victory was not the annihilation of enemies, but complete domination of the battlefield. For Tyberos, this meant war was something personal, something visceral. When he took to the field, it wasn't for honor, it wasn't for the Emperor's glory. It was to feel the pulse of life as it ebbed away beneath his claws, to witness the death of his enemies with the same satisfaction that a wolf might feel after making a kill. It was the ultimate expression of his existence, the hunt, and the hunt was not confined to the battlefield alone. Tyberos was no stranger to wilderness, and neither were the Carcharodons, the desert wastes of distant worlds, the frozen tundras of forgotten planets. These places were as much a part of his experience as the war zones of the galaxy. In these places, Tyberos could feel a different kind of kinship. There was a raw, primal force to these environments that mirrored the savage nature of the Red Wake. Just as he would tear through his enemies on the battlefield, so too would he endure the harshest environments, carving his way through them as a hunter stalks its prey. The men and women who dared to defy the Carcharodons were never granted the luxury of an honorable death. For Tyberos and his chapter, the concept of mercy had long since been discarded, crushed beneath the weight of their unyielding hunger for destruction. Those who were captured were often subjected to a fate worse than death. The Carcharodons did not take prisoners. They consumed them, broke them down in ways that defied the most horrific imaginations. The creatures they hunted were not simply vanquished. They were dismantled, erased from existence, and made to serve as a warning to those who might follow in their footsteps. Tyberos led this relentless hunt with an almost supernatural efficiency. He was as instinctual as the beasts that stalked the shadows of ancient forests. There was no hesitation in his approach. His mind was singular in its purpose, focused solely on the destruction that awaited him. It wasn't enough to strike down his enemies. He sought to annihilate them utterly. His mind had long since passed the point of strategizing for victory. Instead, it existed in a state of perpetual bloodlust, driven not by the need for triumph, but by the compulsion to hunt, to slay, to feel the bone-breaking impact of his claws against the flesh of his foes. But Tyberos' war was not just about the act of killing. It was about the philosophy that underpinned his existence as a Carcharodon. In his eyes, the galaxy was a vast, empty void, one that demanded to be filled with violence. If there was any true meaning to his existence, it lay in the hunt and in the overwhelming silence that followed once his prey had been eradicated. It was only then, in the aftermath of slaughter, that Tyberos could feel the faintest echo of peace. For him, there was no greater reward than the stillness that followed the hunt. This philosophy resonated deeply within the Red Wake, with each member of the chapter embracing it to varying degrees. But Tyberos was different. He was the apex of this ideology, the embodiment of the predatory nature that defined him. He was a hunter, a beast, a creature of pure, unrelenting force. And the galaxy, in all its expanse, was nothing more than his personal hunting ground. Chapter 7, The Whisper of the Void. To the Carcharodons, the galaxy was an endless ocean of stars, each one a fleeting moment of light in a vast, consuming darkness. But Tyberos did not fear the void. He reveled in it. It was in the silence of space, in the endless black expanse between the stars, that he felt closest to his true self. There, in the void, he was not bound by the constraint of time or the expectations of others. He was free to be the predator he had always known himself to be, unchained from the pretense of civilization or duty. The Red Wake, his chapter, was built upon this philosophy. Where other Space Marine chapters held ideals of loyalty and honor, the Carcharodons embraced something far darker, the desire for dominance, the drive to crush all that opposed them. Their methods were brutal, savage, and relentless, and it was in the cold silence of the void that their true nature could be fully understood. In the depths of space, Tyberos could feel the pulse of his own existence, as though the very cosmos responded to his hunger, his relentless need to hunt and conquer. But it was not just in the deep reaches of space that Tyberos found his calling. The surface of the planets he conquered was a place of eternal conflict, where the screams of dying worlds echoed in the distance. Each conquest, each battle, each slaughter was but another opportunity for Tyberos to prove himself, to ascend further into the darkness that had claimed him so long ago. The more blood he spilled, the greater his bond with the void became. It was as though the fabric of reality itself was being woven by his every strike, every death he caused. Yet, even as Tyberos embraced the hunt with unrelenting passion, there were moments, brief as they were, when he could feel the weight of the emptiness around him. The stars were distant, cold, and silent. The planets he conquered were just pieces of a larger puzzle, each one a small step in his relentless march across the galaxy. The fear of the unknown, of what lay beyond even the dark expanse of space, was ever present in the back of his mind. It was a gnawing, ever-hungry thing, one that could not be silenced by battle or conquest. But these moments were fleeting, gone as quickly as they came. In the end, Tyberos had long since made peace with the void, for he knew that he was part of it, as much as it was part of him. The universe was vast, and its darkness was infinite. But in that darkness, Tyberos had found his purpose. He was a hunter, the predator, the beast that stalked the edges of reality itself. The rest of the galaxy may have feared the void, but Tyberos embraced it, for it was in that darkness that he was most alive. Chapter 8. The Aftermath of Annihilation. The battle-scarred galaxy of the Imperium bears the mark of Tyberos' presence. It is not a mark seen in the fleeting moments of combat, but in the eerie silence that follows. The dust settles, but the consequences of his actions echo far beyond the planets he has touched. The world falls silent, much like the void itself. The stillness only broken by the faint hum of machines that continue on long after the battle has ended. Tyberos does not seek glory. He does not need accolades or recognition. The Carcharodons are not warriors who demand the praise of the masses, for they understand that their role in the universe is not one of celebration. They are the predators of the galaxy, existing in the shadows, unrelenting, unnoticed by most until they strike. They do not care for the honor of victory. Their only goal is annihilation. Tyberos embodies this purpose with an unsettling clarity. The aftermath of his campaigns is not a spectacle of triumph. No banners are raised. No voices cry out in victory. Instead, there is silence. And within that silence lies the grim message of Tyberos' existence. A world is not simply conquered by the Carcharodons. It is erased. When they leave nothing behind. No monuments to their success. No memorials to mark the lives lost in battle. The inhabitants of these worlds do not die in glorious battle. They simply vanish, erased as if they never existed. The land itself, once vibrant with life, is now desolate, uninhabitable, a wasteland of what was. Cities stand empty, their once bustling streets abandoned, not a trace of civilization remaining. This is not a mercy. It is the cost of crossing paths with Tyberos. For those who have witnessed a red wake, it is not just a reminder of their failure to resist. It is a lesson, one taught in the most brutal and final manner possible. The galaxy is not a place of safety. It is a hunting ground, and Tyberos is the hunter. The Carcharodons' methods are as cruel as they are effective. No attempt at resistance are spared. No tactics to evade them prove successful. Once the Carcharodons set their sights on a world, they become an unstoppable force. Whether it is a sudden, overwhelming shock of their assault, or the calculated, merciless eradication of entire societies. There is no escape. The great cities of these planets, once teeming with life, now stand abandoned, untouched by time or nature, because there is no one left to occupy them. The war machines of the Imperium move on, but these forgotten worlds remain, a testament to the efficacy of Tyberos' philosophy. They are not markers of conquest. They are graves, mass graves that stretch across the stars, marked only by the faint memories of what once was. In the aftermath, the galaxy does not mourn. There is no memorial to the lives lost, no moment of reflection on the battles fought. Instead, there is only the void, the silence that remains after the storm. For the galaxy knows that Tyberos' work is never finished. There's always another world to conquer, another enemy to erase, another predator to hunt. The Red Wake, once unleashed, is unstoppable. It continues to spread across the stars, a dark reminder that the Carcharodons and their chapter master are relentless in their purpose. There is no place safe from their wrath, no sanctuary that can shield the universe from the hunger of the space sharks. The galaxy trembles as Tyberos moves further into the darkness, always hunting, always waiting for the next target. And as long as the Imperium stands, he will remain an indomitable force, a shadow that will never truly fade. His legacy is written not in the pages of history, but in the void left behind by those who dare to oppose him. Chapter 9, The Price of Silence. In the wake of the Carcharodon's path of destruction, the galaxy finds itself scarred and haunted by the echoes of their actions. The price of silence, the price of the absence left behind by Tyberos in his chapter, is one that cannot be easily measured. For while the galaxy may not hear the cries of the fallen, the void feels the absence. The stars themselves tremble in the wake of his passage. Tyberos does not seek to leave behind a legend. He does not care for the stories that will be told about him, nor the songs that will one day be sung. His actions are not about glory or victory. They are about erasure. And as the silence spreads, the legacy of Tyberos solidifies not in the hearts of the people, but in the voids between the stars. What remains of a world once touched by Tyberos? What echoes are left when entire civilizations are extinguished? There is no remembrance. There are no monuments to the lives lost. There is only the emptiness, a profound and unnerving silence. It is a silence that speaks louder than any battle cry, more terrifying than the loudest screams. This silence is a true cost of defying Tyberos, the true price of crossing paths with the Red Wake. To resist him is to risk oblivion, and those who fight against him are condemned not to die with dignity, but to disappear entirely. There is no body left to mourn, no heroes to praise. There is only the void, and in that emptiness, the memory of their existence fades, leaving behind nothing but dust. The galaxy continues to move forward, but it does so with the knowledge that Tyberos' legacy is one of fear. His name will not be sung by the bards of the Imperium. His actions will not be written in the annals of history. He will be remembered not for the victories he achieved, but for the lives he erased. His reign is one of silence, a silence that is felt across the stars, a silence that will never be broken. And so, Tyberos continues his eternal hunt. The galaxy may change, civilizations may rise and fall, but his legacy will remain cast in shadow. He is the predator of the Imperium, the one who exists in the darkness, hunting in silence, waiting for his next quarry. And as long as there is breath in the universe, there will always be another world, another society, another target for Tyberos to strike. The hunt never ends. Chapter 10, Shadows Without End. There are many horrors in the galaxy, demons that whisper madness, tyrannids that consume all, Xenos empires that carve out domains from the Imperium's bleeding body. But none are as silent, none as ghostly as Tyberos and his kin. The Red Wake leaves behind no trail, no signal, no warning. It does not scream across the stars like the Orc Wyax or flicker, like the warp storms of the Eye of Terror. It moves in silence, a creeping dread that falls upon worlds like fog. You only realize the storm has come when it's already too late. When your skies are on fire, your strongholds collapse into ash, and your screams are swallowed whole by the quiet. Those who survive, if any, speak of eyes in the dark, of void-black armor glinting faintly under pale, alien moons, of a figure whose presence alone twisted the air, made even seasoned Astartes falter. They speak of Tyberos like a myth, like a ghost story told on dying worlds. But he is no myth. He is inevitability. There are records buried, redacted, sealed in the deepest vaults of the Adeptus Administratum that suggest Tyberos have been operating longer than anyone knows. That the Red Wake is not just a new tide, but a reawakening of something ancient. That before he was known as Tyberos, before the name Red Wake stained the records of planetary governors, he had already slaughtered civilizations now long forgotten. Some say he was born not just for war, but from it, that his soul was molded in the crucible of extinction, that he carries not just the tactics of a warrior, but the instinct of a predator from a darker age, that the Emperor himself, in some unspoken design, allowed beings like Tyberos to exist outside the law, to do what others could not or would not, because what the Imperium needs is not always what it wants. It does not want a butcher, but it needs one. Tyberos understands this truth better than any Lord Commander or High Marshal. He does not serve out of loyalty. He serves because the stars are filled with filth, and someone must cleanse them. Someone must be the monster that monsters fear. Someone must become the black tide that washes over decay. His loyalty is not to the Imperium nor the Emperor. It is to the hunt, the sacred rite of annihilation, the code of silence and slaughter passed down through blood and steel. The Red Wake is not a strategy. It is a religion, and Tyberos is its prophet. Chapter 11, The Silence Between Breaths. There are moments in battle when time stretches, not slows, stretches, where the world ceases to be a storm of gunfire and screaming, and instead becomes a silence between those sounds, where the breath you take feels like an eternity, and in that eternity, death itself watches you. Tyberos lives in that silence. To the chapter, the Red Brethren, and even the Sharks of Carcharodon myth, the moment of the kill is sacred. But to Tyberos, it's the moment before the kill that holds true power. That final second where predator and prey lock eyes, where fear crystallizes into a thing you can taste. That is where he thrives. He remembers one such moment clearly, though to him, memory is more scent and sensation than linear thought. The reek of burning bone, the faint metallic taste of blood mist drifting through his rebreather, the whisper of a heretic's final prayer, caught in a gurgle before the strike. He waited just long enough for the traitor to see him, to know Tyberos didn't kill to win wars. He killed to send messages written in arterial spray, carved into stone and psyche alike. And the message was always the same. You were never safe. You were never alone. His presence on the battlefield did not shift tides. It erased them. Where other Astartes were icons of hope or terror, Tyberos was a force of nature, like the deep sea itself, ancient, unfathomable, full of monsters that were never meant to be seen. There were entire forge worlds that spoke of the Red Wake as an omen. When communications failed, when the Mechanicus binary hymns were silenced mid-sentence, when sensor arrays showed nothing but black, they knew Tyberos had arrived. But his strength was not just in killing. It was in understanding what to leave behind. A symbol, a ritual, a memory, one that would ferment like rot in the minds of survivors. He understood the value of psychological warfare, not as a tool, but as an art. He was a sculptor, and fear was his marvel. To understand Tyberos is to understand that he was never meant to be a hero or even a champion. He was meant to be a boundary, a final line, a primal scream in a galaxy that had forgotten how to feel anything other than pain. When he stands in silence, motionless, the tide stilled, it's not because he doubts. It's because he's listening, not with ears, but with instinct, for the ripple, the shift, the softest beat of a heart that still thinks it can escape him. And when that beat comes, he moves, and the silence ends. Chapter 12. The chain that binds the abyss. There are chains that bind bodies, shackles of iron and steel, forged in the manufactorings of servitude and war. Those chains rust. They can be shattered with time, with strength, with cunning. But then there are chains that bind the soul, invisible, eternal. And Tyberos wears those chains not as a captive, but as a sentinel. He is bound not by force, but by conviction, not to a cause or a doctrine, or even to the Imperium itself. His bond lies deeper, older, feral in its purity, a compulsion not born of reason, but of design, a mandate written in the marrow of the Carcharodons, whispered in the warp before the birth of stars. The moment his true chain was forged, Tyberos was not even in battle. It was after. The battlefield was silent, a void choked with the stillness of death. Corpses of traitor Astartes littered the floor, iron warriors, corrupted beyond recognition. Their armor remains fused with scrap metal, teeth, and heretical circuitry. They had believed themselves fortified, unbreakable. But they had not accounted for him. He walked among them like a wraith, his armor dripping with gore, his every step disturbing the sacred quiet. And in that quiet, it called to him, not a voice, not a command, an impulse. The abyss recognized him, not as a servant, not as prey, but as its anchor. Something ancient stirred within Tyberos that day, a memory that did not belong to him. Visions of black oceans and dying suns, a beast too vast for mortal comprehension, riding beneath the void. He saw a city of bone beneath the stars. He heard drums in the silence, and he understood that he was not born to be a leader. He was shaped to be a threshold, a keeper of balance, a force of subtraction. The Carcharodons are not conquerors. They are not defenders. They are subtraction incarnate. The blade that comes not when the tide rises, but when the dam has broken. And Tyberos, he is their herald. Each battle leaves a scar on his armor, yes, but it leaves a deeper scar in his mind, not out of guilt, not out of doubt, but from memory. Each target, each heretic, each purged world, it all adds to a ledger only he can see, and that ledger is never clean. Others speak of the Emperor's light. Tyberos walks in the Emperor's absence. He knows the truth. The Emperor no longer watches, no longer whispers. The Imperium shambles forward, blind and crumbling. It needs monsters now, monsters it can deny, monsters it can use. The Carcharodons were never built for glory. They were created to end things. Tyberos understands this better than anyone. And that is why he binds himself willingly to the chain. It's not a leash. It's a promise to never let himself forget what he is, to never let the galaxy forget why he exists. Chapter 13, The Echo in the Deep. There is silence in the void. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of something vast, ancient, and unknowable. A silence so heavy it crushes thoughts and bleeds into the marrow. Tyberos walked within it, not as a man, not even as a monster, but as an echo of a god that never was. His brothers, now fewer, gathered behind him. Their armor bore the scars of 1,000 worlds, but none dared speak of weariness. None dared whisper of end, for in the void, words had weight, and even breath could summon death. Tyberos had led them through storms of iron and seas of flame, But what lay before them now was different. The warp shadows here were thicker, not just in presence, but in memory. This place, this hollow star system long dead and forgotten by imperial cartographers, whispered in a language of hunger. Ships long consumed by entropy floated as monuments to silence. Time bent strangely. Lights flickered in patterns that mimicked breathing. The void here was not empty. It waited, and Tyberos, the red wake, had come to meet it. There was a sensation clawing at the edge of his mind, old and familiar, not fear. He had long shed that in the blood waters of Carcharodon trials. It was something deeper, recognition. He had seen this before, once, long ago, in a dream perhaps, or in the throes of one of the Red Brethren's death chants. He remembered water, deep, crushing, eternal, and something beneath it, not asleep, but waiting, watching, something that did not need eyes or voice or name, something like this. A voice not spoken, but pressed into his mind, began to whisper. It was neither malevolent nor kind. It simply was as the ocean simply is. It didn't command or demand. It only invited. Come. Tyberos did not respond. He knew better than to answer echoes. The void would always answer back, and it was with the voice of someone long dead. His boots scraped the ancient hull of a derelict vessel, pre-heresy. By the look of it, its sigils had long been scraped off, but the shape of them remained. Here, once, had stood a proud legion. Now it was home to silence. As he moved, the void around him trembled, not visibly, but in sensation, in meaning. A shadow swam behind the stars. Not chaos, not Xenos. Something older, something deeper. His brothers fanned out, their formation precise, their thoughts nearly one. They were not connected by psyche or filth. The Carcharodons abhorred such weakness, but by shared experience, shared trauma. They read one another's intent, as sharks read the waves before a kill. Then came the scent. It pierced the filters of their helms, not physically, but spiritually. The scent of remembered blood, ancient, cold, impossible. Even through ceramite and years of battle hardening, it stopped some in their stride, but not Tyberos. He strode forward, following it, pulled by something that felt both alien and intimate. It was not the scent of prey. It was the scent of origin. He came to a chamber. The walls were lined with what looked like rib cages of extinct titans, fused of machinery long dead. In the center stood a throne, no emperor's seat, but something more primitive, more raw. It looked carved from bone and blackened iron, and seated upon it was a thing. Not alive, not quite dead. Not human, not alien. Something between. Its eyes opened as Tyberos approached, and the red wake saw himself, or what he could have been, reflected in them. It spoke without sound. You have come far. Tyberos did not answer. You seek meaning, identity. You tear through the galaxy with fangs bared, but you do not know why. You hide behind the edicts of the Imperium, the blood-slick rules of your chapter, the silence of the deep void, but none of these are yours. They are cages. You are still in the womb of your making. The thing stood. It was taller than Tyberos, impossibly so, and yet it did not threaten. It only waited. It held out a hand, not an offering, but in challenge. Take it, and be what you were meant to be. Tyberos stared. Was this a test? A vision? A lie? The red wake did not believe in prophecy. He believed in scars, in hunts, in action. Yet something deep within him, the same place where old instincts lived, stirred. He stepped forward. He took the hand. And the void, the true void, opened. Chapter 14, Red Wake Eternal. He fell, not through space nor time, but through self. Tyberos had shattered, not with sound, but in silence. The silence of a truth too heavy to carry. Beneath his armor, Beneath his mind, something cracked open, and from it flowed memories, origins, and buried secrets. He was no longer the Carcharodon. He was the deep, the primal hunger of it. He saw it now, the Chirurgeons. They had not healed but created. His brothers were not men made into monsters. They were predators crafted in the shadows, forged not by the Emperor's will, but by the cold hands of necessity. They were weapons, discarded and remade. He saw the truth of his creation. No higher purpose, no divine destiny, just survival, brutality, and silence. His own hands were stained with it, and at the center of the vision, a throne of bone, waiting, unoccupied. Tyberos stepped toward it, understanding at last. The throne wasn't meant for another. It was his. He had always been its rightful heir, not by birth, but by choice, by power, by hunger. A predator does not ask permission. It takes, and Tyberos knew this now. He didn't seek approval or forgiveness. He had come to understand the nature of the Carcharodons. Not lost sons, not slaves to imperial will, but creatures of the deep, born to dominate, born to devour. He sat, and the sea of memory, the sea of instinct, embraced him. His eyes snapped open. The cold blackness of space surrounded him, but it no longer felt the same. His brothers stood in a circle around him, watching in silence. They knew. They had seen the transformation before. They knew what it meant. Tyberos rose, the air thickened around him, charged with something ancient, something powerful. He was no longer just a member of the Red Wake. He was the Red Wake. He was Carcharodon Prime. He was the apex, the hunter, the god. He looked at his brothers, his legion, and they understood. No words needed to be said. There was no more need for loyalty to Terra. No more need for the Emperor's false promises. The Imperium did not control them. They were not pawns in a greater game. They were the game. Tyberos set his course. His fleet followed, silent, unyielding, unstoppable. The Imperium would feel his presence soon enough. Entire systems would vanish without a trace. Xenos would fall before they even had time to realize what was coming. But it wouldn't be a war. It wouldn't be a crusade. It would be a cleansing. And Tyberos would not be merciful. He had no time for forgiveness. His legion was not born to save. They were born to consume, to rise from the deep and bring forth the silence. The galaxy would know what it meant to face the Red Wake. Tyberos had created something new. Not a legion, not an army, but a force. Not bound by the Emperor's promises, not shackled by the remnants of a broken Imperium, but free to roam the stars as they saw fit, to become what they were always meant to be, predators, and the galaxy would tremble. In the end, there would be no statues of Tyberos, no song sung, no monuments erected in his name. The Red Wake would be remembered not in history books, but in nightmares. When the galaxy looked into the dark void of space, they would see nothing but the abyss and feel the unrelenting pressure of what lurked within it. Tyberos was not just a Red Wake. He was its master. He was its god. This ends the tale of Tyberos, the once forgotten, now awakened. As the Red Wake continues to leave its mark on the galaxy, the shadows grow deeper and the silence louder. And when the galaxy asks, "Who is this god of destruction?" the answer will always be the same. The one who rose from the deep and never looked back. Thank you for listening to this lore. If you loved it, make sure to like and subscribe, and to stay tuned for next lore videos. Goodbye.